Hey everyone, welcome back to another Animal Notebook Explainer. Today, we're diving into a creature that's, quite frankly, a modern-day marvel. Our explainer today is called Alligator, the ancient reptile, and we're going to get way deep into the biology, the behavior, and the wild history of the American alligator. I mean, these guys are powerful, they're resilient, and they're absolutely vital to the ecosystems they call home.
Just look at this absolute unit. The American alligator is the definition of an apex predator. And what's really mind-blowing here is that these reptiles are true ancient survivors. I mean, their ancestors date all the way back to the age of the dinosaurs. We're talking tens of millions of years ago. So today, we're going to use the facts, use the science, to figure out exactly how they've managed to totally dominate their wetland habitats for all that time, literally without needing to change much of anything.
So, here's our game plan for today. We'll kick things off with the anatomy of an apex predator. Check out their diet and habitat, explore their life cycle and reproduction, take a look at a massive conservation success story, and then wrap the whole thing up with some alligator FAQs.
All right, let's dive right into Section 1, Anatomy of an Apex Predator. From that super thick armored skin packed with bony plates called osteoderms, down to those massive muscular tails, every single inch of this animal is basically a biological machine built for survival. But first, let's clear up a super common point of confusion. How on earth do you tell an alligator apart from a crocodile? Well, it's actually pretty simple if you just look at the head. See, the American alligator has this really broad, U-shaped snout. Plus, its upper jaw is wider than its lower jaw. So when its mouth is closed, those lower teeth are completely hidden. A crocodile, though, has a much narrower, V-shaped snout, and its lower teeth actually stick out, visibly interlocking even when the mouth is shut tight.
Okay, let's talk about raw power. Take a look at this number, 2,900. That right there is the alligator's bite force, measured in pounds per square inch. It is insanely powerful. That broad snout we just looked at, combined with this bone-crushing bite force, means they are perfectly engineered to absolutely obliterate hard-shelled prey, like turtles, which, as it turns out, are a regular staple on their menu.
But wait, what happens when all that chomping wears down their teeth? Well, check out this next number, 3,000. No way, right? But yes, an alligator can go through roughly 3,000 teeth in a single lifetime. They're constantly, and I mean constantly, shedding and regrowing them, replacing each individual tooth up to 50 times. Since they usually have between 74 and 80 teeth in their mouths at any given moment, this crazy turnover guarantees they always have the razor-sharp tools they need to get the job done.
Moving right along, let's jump into Section 2, Diet and Habitat. It's kind of wild when you look at the stark contrast in their daily routine. On one hand, you have this really docile, almost lazy behavior. Because they're ectothermic, cold-blooded, they have to rely on the outside temperature to regulate their body heat. So you'll often see them just socially basking in the sun, soaking up those rays. But then, on the flip side, you have their true predatory nature. When it's time to eat, they are explosive, totally stealthy ambush predators. They'll just float there, practically motionless near the water's edge, perfectly camouflaged with literally just their eyes and nostrils sticking out, and then, boom, they strike with unbelievable speed.
But here's the thing, and this is a really crucial point. Alligators aren't just out there hunting. Biologists actually call them ecosystem engineers. During the dry seasons in their marsh and swamp habitats, alligators will literally use their massive bodies to bulldoze huge depressions in the mud, which we call gator holes. Why does this matter? Well, when the rest of the swamp completely dries up, these holes still hold water. They become these tiny, life-saving oasis pools for fish, birds, turtles, and basically the rest of the wildlife in the area. They literally keep the entire wetland ecosystem from collapsing during a drought.
All right, let's get into Section 3, Life Cycle and Reproduction. So alligators have this really wild quirk in their biology. Unlike mammals, they actually don't have sex chromosomes. Instead, they use something called temperature-dependent sex determination. Basically, during the middle third of the egg's incubation, the actual temperature inside the nest permanently decides the hatchling's sex. If it's warm, like above 90 degrees Fahrenheit, you get males. If it's cooler, below 86 degrees, you get females. And if the nest is hovering somewhere right in the middle, you get a nice healthy mix of both. How crazy is that?
And the whole maternal journey is just as incredible to watch. First, the mom builds this massive mound out of mud and rotting vegetation, and she lays about 20 to 50 eggs inside. Now, as that vegetation rots, it physically heats up, acting like a giant natural incubator for about 65 days. And here is my favorite part. When the babies are ready to hatch, they actually start making these high-pitched little grunting noises from inside the eggs.
The mom hears this, she digs up the nest, and then, even with that terrifying 2,900-pound bite force we talked about, she very gently scoops up her babies in her jaws and carries them to the water. She'll actually stick around and protect them for up to 2 years.
Which brings us to Section 4, a conservation success story.
So back in the mid-20th century, things were looking pretty grim. The American alligator was being hunted heavily for its skin and meat, which led to a completely catastrophic population crash. By 1967, they were officially listed as endangered. It was bad. But thanks to some seriously strict federal and state protections, better habitat management, and focused breeding programs, their numbers just exploded back to life. Literally just 20 years later, in 1987, they were taken off the endangered list completely. Today, they are absolutely thriving. They're categorized as least concern, making this one of the greatest conservation comeback stories in history.
And finally, let's wrap things up with Section 5, Alligator FAQs.
We've covered a lot of ground today, but there are always more questions when it comes to these prehistoric tanks. So let's start with a question we get a lot from the animal notebook community: longevity. Considering they're basically swimming armor and sit right at the top of the food chain, exactly how long can an American alligator live out there in the wild?
Well, the answer is surprisingly long. In the wild, they typically live somewhere between 35 and 50 years, and honestly, sometimes even longer than that. But in captivity, where they get a steady food supply and don't have to deal with the harsh realities of nature, they've been known to live for 60 to 80 years. And a huge factor in that incredibly long lifespan is just their super slow metabolism. Okay, FAQ number 2. This one is a bit of a geographical paradox. We know they're cold-blooded and rely on the sun for heat. So can alligators actually survive extreme winter freezes when the water literally turns to solid ice?
The answer is yes, and let me tell you how they do it is totally bizarre. They enter this state of dormancy called brumation. It's basically the reptile version of hibernation. If the water surface starts to freeze over, the alligator will just stick its snout right above the waterline and let the water freeze entirely around its body. No joke, they become trapped in the ice like biological statues. They slow their heart rate way down, just enough to stay alive, all while keeping those nostrils exposed so they can keep on breathing. It's wild.
Moving on to question number 3, which is all about their aquatic endurance. Since they are, after all, air-breathing reptiles that spend a ton of time hunting in the water, how long can they actually hold their breath when they're totally submerged?
So, during normal activity, an alligator is going to surface every few minutes. But remember those stealth capabilities we talked about? If they are resting, hiding from a threat, or just patiently waiting for the perfect meal to wander by, they can slow their bodily functions down so much that they can stay completely underwater for up to an hour. A full hour without a single breath.
And that brings us to our 4th and final FAQ, which is actually a bit of history and etymology. We throw the word around all the time, but where does the name alligator actually come from? So the name is actually born out of a historical misunderstanding. When early Spanish explorers first showed up in the Americas and saw these massive armored beasts crawling around the swamps, they didn't have a word for them. So they just called them el lagarto, which in Spanish literally just translates to the lizard. Later on, English settlers, who I guess weren't feeling super creative at the time, just mashed those words together into the name we all use today, alligator.
And that brings us to the end of our journey today. But before we go, I really want to leave you with this one thought. If the alligator managed to survive the exact same catastrophic events that completely wiped out the dinosaurs, what could their unbelievable biological resilience teach us about surviving the next million years? Something to think about, right? Anyway, thank you all so much for hanging out with me on this Animal Notebook Explainer. Keep observing, keep asking those big questions about the natural world, and I will see you in the next one.